Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Enough to Keep Going podcast. This is episode number 332 for April 2nd, 2024. That's right. We're coming to you on a Tuesday this week. I think most of us, if not all of us, were busy this Easter weekend, so we decided to push up the show a little bit. But with me tonight is Mr. DBQ Hams. DB, how are you doing?
Well, I am pretending like it's 2019 and I'm getting excited about a Destiny 2 live stream. Woo! So, no, there was the final reveal for the last piece of content that's coming for Destiny 2 came out today, and that launches on April 9th. All of this is really just kind of stringing together the delayed launch of the final shape. But I don't know. I'd like to... My cynical self likes to remember a time when I was really excited about new content in Destiny, and now I am just like, oh yeah, that was a thing. So
Destiny, that's right. I'm sure you'll pick it up and have some fun with it. And also we have Mr. GameLogIQ. Game, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, man. Fresh off Cat Patrol. As we mentioned, either we were successful at getting the cat to come back inside, which the cat took off before we left for spring break. So, yeah. I mean, the good news is that amazingly, maybe not amazingly, but it survived and it stayed in the vicinity of the house. So that's good.
The cat's been gone for multiple days and now is like coming back around.
Well, yeah. So the cats live in the garage. The cat, this one cat who has never ventured near the garage door ever. So typically, like when the house cleaners come, I have to take the recycling out to the garage and stage it right before, because the cleaners come on a different day than recycling gets picked up. So I often have to get the recycling out of the cleaners' way, and so I have to stage it in the garage. So then the following day, typically, I wind up opening the garage doors to take the recycling out down to the side of the road, because I'm not going to take the recycling, bring it back inside the house, take it out through the front door. So the cats, typically when the garage door goes up, get like super afraid of the garage door and go like hide underneath the stairs. The younger male cat has gotten bold enough to where he will venture just outside the doors, but he never goes far. And when I yell at him and tell him to come back inside, he will go back inside. The older female cat, who's actually the mother cat, has never ventured anywhere. She's super skittish, doesn't let people pick her up. Like getting her into a crate is like a rodeo. So she's super skittish, doesn't let anybody pick her up, goes and cowers like anytime you get near her. Typically we like don't handle her, we just try and chase her to wherever it is that we want her to go. So she has never ventured near the garage door. For some reason, 2 nights before we were supposed to leave for spring break, apparently, while I wasn't watching her, because I felt like I never needed to watch her because she was so skittish and never ventured near the garage door, that night she apparently slipped out without me seeing her. So my wife, that night, so this is 2 nights before we leave for spring break, heard some cats fighting outside the bedroom window and got up and went and looked and saw a cat like in a tree that was not our cat. But we didn't realize that cat was in the tree because it had been chased up that tree by our cat who had gotten out. So 24 hours later, now the night before we were leaving for spring break, I realize that the mother cat is not in the garage, because typically when I come to the garage door and open it, the cats are there waiting, looking to see if they're going to be fed. So on multiple occasions, in that 24-hour time, I had gone out to the garage and the male cat had been there, but the mother cat hadn't been around. So as skittish as she is, she will always come to see who's coming to the door, again, to see if it's feeding time. So the night before, so I guess the night before, I let my wife know, hey, I think the mother cat is gone. Like, I haven't seen her come out in the garage. I've gone around the garage with a broomstick and like banged around in corners and stuff, and she hasn't like scurried out. So So we left food on the porch, on the front porch and on the back porch before we left. But she's a small critter, so she does not set off the Ring doorbell, right? And admittedly, I'm not sure if we put the food on the back porch like right under, but I had forgotten to turn the security cameras on like intermittently, like when we were gone. So she's been coming on the front porch to get that food, and I've noticed like that food has been depleted. Like I look at it on the Ring doorbell, I'm like, oh, like that food is like something has taken food out of the bowl, but we didn't know that it was the actual cat. So tonight, right before the podcast, I'm going up to like lock the screen door and batten down the hatches and stuff for the night. And just as I open the door, I see a streak of black, like just run right out of my vision. And then I'm like calling for the cat. And then I hear the cat like, meowing and stuff. And then, get an eyeball on her and see that it's her. So what ensued after that was like a 15 or 20 minute exercise, right? Trying to get the skittish cat inside the door, because I was, when I left, we had taken the younger male cat, put that cat in a carrier and locked him in, opened the garage door in the hopes that the mother cat, hearing her son like meowing, would come inside the garage. But as I mentioned to you guys right before we went live, as I was down here, right, just as we were going live, I heard the garage door close, and I was like, well, we either got the cat in, or much like the doors on Snowbase Hoth, in the night, the doors close. My wife and my daughter had given up on finding Luke and Han. We'll send speeders out in the morning. So I don't know. And I haven't gotten a text message back yet to let me know whether or not mission was successful or not. So
I was imagining you guys running around like Benny Hill music playing in the background.
well, there was a little bit of that, because I was like shaking food. Like there was the glass bowl. I put food in the bowl. I'd seen the cat. I was like shaking the food bowl, trying to get and the cat. This is the frustrating thing. The cat had come up to me and was like, meowing and like, rubbing against my leg, right? But would not go inside the door to the house. So she was literally like inches in front of the door, wouldn't go inside the door to the house where the food bowl was. I'd sprinkled a couple like bits of kibble like out on the porch, and she'd come up and eaten those, but she wouldn't go inside the house. She wouldn't like follow the breadcrumb trail to the bowl. And then of course, the moment I reached down to pick her up, she like took off. And then like, I was like, at any rate, the other thing I mentioned, you guys were like, should we scrub tonight? And I was like, it's not my cat. Like this is my wife and my daughter's cat. Like they were insistent on bringing these cats home. There's some emotional attachment for my wife to the mother cat, because that was actually my wife's grandmother's cat before my grandmother passed away. So there's some extreme emotional attachment there. I am willing to do whatever it takes to try and get the cat back, but
that's the right husband response.
Yes.
Congratulations.
We've upgraded our tech issues now that they've upgraded to animal issues now these past few months. Between Vivi's dog and now we got the cats going.
That's right. Like last month it was my dog's chewing. This month it's the cat cast. So
cast, that's right. All right. Well, that's 10 minutes in almost, and we haven't even talked video games yet. So let's jump into the main GX stories, and I'll start us off with a game that actually saw our own E2KG's own Swiss Guard had picked up. It's called Hellish Quart. It is a 3D physics-based fighting game, like sword fighting game. So kind of, if you guys remember, I think what was it, Bushido Blade back in the day, where it was kind of like those one-hit shots that you can get, or I think it was pretty much always one-hit shots.
Kind of on the original PlayStation.
Yeah, original PlayStation. So it's kind of like that. Here's a little bit more forgiving. Sometimes there's like 2 or 3 hits, but I don't think I've seen more than like 3 hits on a person or a player, and you pretty much down the person. I've been playing this on my Steam Deck so far. For right now, it is early access, which like 90% of my games lately have been, any Steam game I think I bought is like early access now. A lot of the VR ones, especially too, but a lot of the regular PC flat screen, as I hear a lot of people calling it, games though have been early access. So it's like this is so early access. Like they even have like the placeholders for like, so they'll just have like a wall of text at the beginning of like one of the modes. for like each character when you pick a character, and then, it just kind of gives them a story, and there's like a little placeholder at the bottom saying, yeah, this is just a placeholder for a cutscene later on, when the game's released. So haven't seen any firm release date yet, but since I'm still seeing that kind of stuff in there, it's probably a good ways off, at least at the end of the year or so, I would think. But who knows? And a lot of times too, when I was playing the game, uh, you'd see you kind of see that same thing where it's like a placeholder for like text or whatever for like a cutscene. But then especially at the end where you're fighting the boss, it's like not only do you have that, but then it's like, oh, this is super early that we don't even have voiceover work yet for it. You can see like the character talking, but there's like nothing coming out of his mouth other than just kind of gibberish. So super early access, but it's pretty fun. And this is kind of, it's not modern day like sword fighting. So you're back in the I don't know what era this would be, but they have like different sword styles. You get like the fencer, and you have um trying to think of a couple other characters. I've only played a couple of characters so far, like a Russian guy with like his different swords. So they all have different swords, which is kind of nice. So it's kind of a different style, but I think I think I'm on my third character now that I've played through. Not really a story. They have like a separate story mode, but that's not even available yet to play through. But if you just do like the regular like CPU battles, that's where you kind of see like the cutscenes, kind of like old school, like Mortal Kombat, and I think even Tekken does that too, where like you're just playing the character and they give you like a little backstory um, to the character, and then there's like a cutscene here and there, and then a big one at the end, kind of telling their story. So I've been doing that, but I've only played like two or three, and um, the first one I did was really weird. It almost looked like he had a cane, but the end of the cane, instead of like where you'd hold it, was actually like it was like serrated and like a knife edge. So it was kind of weird. There's just like a weird and a weird sword or weapon that he was using. And then there's a couple of other ones were just like a broadsword and kind of like a curved sword and stuff like that. So, but there's a bunch of different let's see, I was trying to think. I think there's like 12 maybe. And I think there's been one that I couldn't choose. It said it'd be, released later on or available later on. So otherwise I probably would have been a little bit more into the different characters. So I usually like to just kind of play through like that, and, see each character's storyline. That's how I do in a Mortal Kombat. So, or at least the last few. Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's pretty, uh, I guess a little bit gory. Like there's blood, like when you're hitting people, and you kind of see like if you just like stab somebody in the chest, you see like the little blood spot. You can cut off limbs sometimes. It's not like in every shot. So I've only cut off hands so far. I don't know if you can cut off like a whole arm or leg or anything like that, but I've cut off head to head. The head one though, the couple times I've done it is more of a like when you grab the person, you kind of goes through like an animation, then he like cuts the head off. So that's kind of cool. Um, but it looks pretty good. So even though it is early access, even the backgrounds, the places where you fight in, and although there's a couple where it's just like the ground is different, you could tell, but like the background is just like a black, basically black. I don't know if it's shadowed or if it's obviously they probably don't have like the art yet back in for those stages, but for the most part, everything looks pretty good. On the Steam Deck, I had to fiddle around with the even though it was I forgot what's the yellow, I think playable. Was that yellow? Icon. I had to
Yeah,
actually
usually means it's playable, but it's like some innocuous thing. Like is it like they're like nuisance level bugs? I wouldn't even call them bugs, but they're compatibility issues. Things like the text might be small at certain points, or at certain points you may have to bring up the virtual keyboard because it's asking for a keyboard input.
Yeah, that's what I've usually seen in the past. But this one I actually did have to fiddle with the graphics to actually get it to work, and I had to go on their website, and they have like two or three things you can try if it's not running right. Because when I was first playing the Steam Deck, I'm like, wow, this kind of moves kind of slow. Like it was kind of weird, and then I put it on my PC. I was like, I gotta check this out, and it was like fine on my PC. I was like, all right, there's something wrong, obviously on this day. I gotta mess with stuff. So I had to go on their website into their support page, and there's a whole like I said, there's like two or three things you can do to mess with it and mess with the settings on the actual. Well, I guess both on the Steam Deck itself and then in game. So I had to do that. So it's a little of annoying, but once I got through those steps, at least I had to kind of step by step what to try. But overall, though, it's pretty fun. I've beaten the boss with a couple of characters. Like there's. Man, I don't know if I'm getting old or what, but I had to put it down easy on a couple of the characters because I couldn't beat him. Like he was just like kicking my butt. And the thing too is, well, I think by default they have it. You have to win best out of 3, so 2 out of 3 wins. But when you get to the boss, you have to beat him, 2 out of 3, but he only has to beat you twice. Or I'm sorry, he only has to beat you. You have to beat him 3 times. Sorry, not 2 out of 3, and he only has to beat you twice. So, and he's armored, so that's kind of another handicap on you. So it's kind of rough there. But like I said, it's still early access too. So, but overall, it's a pretty good game, and I'm still kind of just every once in a while, like I'll play like a game or two of that with a couple different characters just to get into it. And so thank you, Swissguard, for that one, even though it was kind of indirect recommendation, I guess. All right, any comments or questions on that one? No. All right, let's jump into the next one, which I think DB will chime in on this one also. So MLB The Show, I've been playing last couple weeks, I guess, now since it's been out. I missed last week's episode. I think you talked about a little bit last episode, DB. But it's, I think, kind of like you said, it's kind of MLB The Show. Like, it's not anything like drastically different, because obviously this is, it's a sports game that's coming out every year for the past I guess on the Xbox and Switch, it's been like the last 3-4 years, but it's been out for a while now, I think, on PlayStation, right?
Yeah, I mean, PlayStation's been 15 years probably.
Oh, wow.
Talking 2008, 2009, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, for multi-platform, it's been only since 21.
Yeah, so I jumped. I didn't get a chance to get to the story stuff, the Negro League stuff from the last one. So I want to try to get that. Can you play the first season on this one? And I don't even know. No,
the first season is in 23, so you'd have
it's just
to
locked at 23.
keep that installed. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'll have to reinstall it, because I installed it when actually I think it might be out of Game Pass now. Although I did get it on Switch, so I can go back and just play it on there.
At the end of the month, it left Game Pass.
Yeah, so I can go. Yeah, because I'm playing on just through Game Pass with xCloud right now. But I did buy 23 on the Switch, so I can always go back and do that, and then do the women's league stuff too, or the women. But mostly, I just kind of created my character again, which I kind of wish you could somehow like port your last character or your previous character into the games. Like I have to go through and customize it each time.
That was a feature back in the PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4 era. And as it moved over to the current generation, that feature left.
I stopped doing that, man. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like this time I was just like, I kind of almost basically did the default, other than a few tweaks here and there. So I'm just going through the Road to the Show again with my characters. So,
I've been going through Road to the Show as well, but with a female pitcher. So, which has been interesting. And this past week, I got out of AA into AAA. And like it does add some other, you get some additional, like as I talked about last week, you continue to get some additional cutscenes, both video clips and kind of story beats as a female character versus a male character. But I really like some of the stuff that they've done here. And it's been a few years since I've really engaged with the Road to the Show piece in terms of the prospect list. Like if you make the top 100 prospects, there's some additional content and some other tracking that goes on there. So that's adds a little bit more of kind of the world around you as you're playing through in the minor leagues. And I've also last week I said that they didn't do a whole lot with franchise, and one of the things they did with franchise, which I'm trying to still play around with and tweak correctly. But one of the things I've talked about in the past with not Road to the Show, with March to October, is like it jumps you in halfway through a game or in the last 3 innings of an important game. And franchise now has filters where you can set parameters that you can sim through games and jump in at different points in time. Jump in when you're down by 2. Jump in when you're, the count is full. Jump in when there's runners in scoring position. So that allows you to kind of sim through, jump in and play, and then sim back out, right? Like that idea of the reality of trying to get people to play through 180, 160 right game season within Major League Baseball, and how do you do that in a way that allows immersion and the depth of a franchise league, but also doesn't involve spending an entire year to get through it. So that's another feature that they've added within the franchise mode this year.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think the last few years that I've been playing now, I've gotten to AAA as the farthest I've ever gotten with any of my characters so far. Just because I always fall off usually during the summer and stuff, just because I slow down. But I want to try to get my character into the majors at least once. So hopefully this year I'll try to do that. Now, you said you did a pitcher this time? Do you usually do pitchers, or you're just kind of picked whatever?
No, I usually do a pitcher just because it keeps me engaged throughout the game. It's been a few seasons since I like the 22 where they had the Otani where you could do a two-way. Back my character that I still kind of chip away at from 2017 is a two-way player because you could build people. And also back in 2017, the National League, your pitcher could still bat, right? Like there are changes that have happened, but I have figured out the pitch clock is real. So you put it down to take a snack and a drink of water, and the ump gives you a ball because you delayed on the pitch clock. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is. It still is just in terms of the game of baseball, it's such a solid game. I've played around a little bit with Diamond Dynasty in terms of opening up some packs, playing a little bit of the tutorial, but there's so many avenues to engage with that you don't have to engage with the kind of microtransaction card collecting aspect of it.
Nice. All right. GameLogIQ, anything else on MLB or any of these games? No? All right. Let's jump into the main news headlines of this past week or so. GameLogIQ, if you want to start us off with some Dragon Dogma 2 news.
Yeah, this news story over on TechRaptor by Joseph Allen. Dragon's Dogma 2 sales top 2.5 million, series sales soar. Capcom has revealed that open world RPG Dragon's Dogma 2 has crossed a major sales milestone in less than 2 weeks. In a press release, Capcom announces that Dragon's Dogma 2 sales have topped 2.5 million, which is a pretty impressive number considering the game has only been on release for 12 days at the time of writing. By way of explanation for the game's high sales, Capcom points to its marketing initiatives, which include the free character creation app released prior to the game's launch, as well as a trailer starring none other than American Gods' Ian McShane. So I will let you guys refute my premise. So I was reading this. I mean, I don't want to take away from Capcom's success, right? Like, the game came out and it's sold more than, we really need, in the gaming industry, we really need like what the record industry has. We need some notion of like levels of sales numbers that indicate significance, like gold, platinum, 5-time platinum, gold, winning title, whatever, something that means something of significance, so that every time like these things come up, we're not going off to like grade them on a sliding scale to see where they wind up. So when this number was mentioned, the first thing it made me think of was Street Fighter. Street Fighter sales were 6 million last year was the first number that came out that made us note something of significance. Enate is in the chat and mentions agreed logic. Thank you very much, Enate. So my problem, as we talked about on this show a couple of weeks ago, right, was that I felt, I won't speak for everyone else, that there were problems that the game was putting in people's windshield that would make them think, more than you would want people to think, right? You don't really want people to think, right, before they decide whether or not they're going to onboard with your game. You just really kind of want them to go, that looks great, I'm going to get into it, right? But with Dragon's Dogma, the premise that was presented was, that game looks great. Oh, whoa, time out. Hold on a second, right? There's all this baggage and other cruft in my windshield. So when this thing was mentioned, of course, as I am oft skeptical to be, when it comes to lot of times this is around like live service games, a lot of the, celebration that goes on in the first, month of the game's release. And I'm like, well, hold on a second, guys. So I went to look and I was like, well, is 2.5 billion significant? And I think the comparator that I went to look at was kind of what were significant game sales after, say, the first 2 weeks of sales, right? And so Hogwarts Legacy sold 12 million copies in its first 2 weeks. Call of Duty Black Ops 2 back in 2012 sold 7.5 million copies in its first 2 weeks. Marvel Spider-Man 2 sold 5 million copies in its first 2 weeks. And Sonic the Hedgehog 2 back in 1992 sold 3.2 million copies in its first 2 weeks. So the question is this article... Dragon's Dogma kind of right now has this mystique around kind of being this maybe kind of darling, right, of the games media at the time. Capcom is not an indie, but Capcom is I would say is a media darling that often doesn't necessarily get the sales that goes along, doesn't necessarily see the quantifiable commercial success that goes along with it as frequently as you would hope that it would, right, given the zeitgeist of some of its properties. So I'm like, is this a Capcom kind of leaning, Capcom positive like article that is maybe overselling the quantifiable significance of the sales data? I guess is my question.
So as we've pitched out some other numbers, let me pitch out this number from Capcom's Corporate Investors Relation Report in January 16th, 2024. January 16th, 2024, Street Fighter 6 tops over 3 million units sold worldwide. Street Fighter 6 released June 2023. So to hit 3 million 6 months in, I can see why Capcom is touting this number to hit 2.5 2 weeks in, right? Like compared to some other things, not nearly as significant. Within Capcom's own metrics and levels of sales, I could see where this suddenly feels really significant if we're talking 2 months or 2 weeks versus 6 months.
Yeah, and the caveat, yes, I completely, like, I'm trying to say something that doesn't sound overly caustic. Like, I expect the company to report sales numbers, right, and for it to give a favorable light to them. I guess kind of my questioning was, am I being too skeptical, or is this report by Tech Raptor a little more lenient and grading the game on a curve, on a Capcom curve, right? Which is, I think, is a lot of times what we see.
Yeah, I think it is grading it on a Capcom curve, or even on a curve on an IP related curve, right? Like what Dragon's Dogma, the original, was back in the early 2010s. That was a slow burn cult classic that has built up to something that can sell 2.5 million in 2 weeks. I think it is not suddenly this brand new franchise IP, but it is a significant sales number for Capcom as a company. Innate here in the chat talks about, oh yeah, you already have it here, right? Like Resident Evil 4 and the remakes there. I think that all is those are good numbers. And even if Resident Evil 4 took a year to sell 5 million, that it'll be interesting to see where in 6 months from now in the Street Fighter 6 numbers, where Dragon's Dogma is. And I think it is, relative to the rest of the game industry, a relatively small amount of sales. It also is kind of surprising that Dragon's Dogma sold 2 million. Like it is one of those where it hit at a good time. It had a solid cult status, but also hit at a time where there wasn't necessarily a whole lot of competition around for it as well.
Yeah, and Inate's comment kind of he's speaking to some other arguments that I've made in terms of a mathematical estimation or projection model that I built around, what would be the cost of PlayStation going day and date, right? And what would you expect for their estimated sales? What would be the expected cost of doing concurrent development to release on PC? And then what would be the potential impact to their loss of hardware sales, right? Because lots of PC players have PlayStation 5s, and those people aren't going to buy PlayStation 5s if those games are coming to PC on day and date. And what he talks about is how this corroborates, right? Because my argument is a lot of people say, well, if PlayStation would release their games on day and date, they would sell millions. And I'm like, okay, hold on, guys. Like, this is my point. Like, you can't do Capcom level sales, right, for it to make financial sense for PlayStation to go day and date. They've got to be right. Right now they're selling 20 million, 25 million, 30 million copies, right, on PlayStation, and then they go to PC, and then they do kind of Capcom-ish numbers, right, of 2.5, 3, and then that's okay because there's a lag, and that expense has been worked off by depreciation and blah blah blah. Like, but it's not. It doesn't become the same math when you talk about doing day and date. So. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's good news for Capcom, and yay verily, right? Good for them. Just like what we saw with the Street Fighter numbers, we were pleased to see the Street Fighter numbers. We're pleased to see a cult classic like this. That probably, the weird thing is it probably didn't get its fair due in the first one. Probably should have captured a little more zeitgeist, been promulgated a little bit more. There should have been more. A louder volume of word of mouth. Now this time around, it seems like they made the choice to trade on that cult classic word of mouth, that the game got in pre-release, based on the first one. But then, and then because of that, felt like, okay, well, this is also an opportunity here to monetize and to do some other things. So it'll be interesting to see, how it turns out. Capcom is, I mean, they're not even in, when I look at and I'm looking at a quarterly report now, I'll try and find an annualized one, but in the recent round of quarterly reports, I mean, they're not even in the top 25 of revenue earning companies. So, I don't know that 2.5 million sales is industry level significant, but it's definitely Capcom level significant. And there are definitely companies that would love to sell 2.5 million copies of their game, right, in the first 2 weeks. Right?
Yeah, and this was released on everything, right? PCN, well, at least current generation consoles. I don't think this was last gen, right? No. Okay. So yeah. All right. Let's jump on to the next story, which is, I lost my place here. Sorry.
It is Sega selling off Relic Games. So Relic Entertainment, the developers of Company of Hero, Dawn of War, they were now an independent studio that Sega sold them off or allowed them to go independent. But in the process, they also reduced their workforce by 240 jobs across both Creative Assembly and Sega of Europe. In the process of, I'm reading this incorrectly, right? Relic was sold off, and Sega of Europe had a number of cuts as well. So part of the ongoing job constriction and the market constriction in terms of opportunities and layoffs. And we'll talk a little bit more about that this week as well. I had totally forgotten that Relic was working, or that Creative Assembly was working on a Hyenas game, right? I forgot about that Hyenas game completely that Sega had canceled as well. So Sega, that Relic joins the group along with Saber Interactive in terms of kind of going and being independent again.
Yeah, I want to give a few more accolades to Relic because I mean I've I've done the exercise of at one point of doing my top 5 favorite game studios of all time, and Relic is one of them. But these guys have been around since 1997. They were actually the original development studio behind Homeworld, which was published under Sierra Studios, which a lot of us previously knew as Vivendi Universal. And I think that was actually before Vivendi, was part of the investment capital behind the Activision Blizzard merger.
Right. Yeah. The multiple splits and everything else. Yep.
So these were the original guys behind Homeworld. They also did Impossible Creatures, not so well received. Homeworld 2. So I mean, the big thing is this is a big RTS studio. And we talked a few weeks ago about how there have been these periods where RTSs have kind of gone away as a genre of commercial significance. This is a studio that I have to put, I now have another idea for a listicle. I need to put together a list of studios that have been the most significant in terms of their input to the RTS genre. But these guys were behind 3 fairly large RTS franchises: Homeworld, Warhammer 40,000, and Company of Heroes. And Company of Heroes in particular, which launched in 2006, so kind of like in the height of the Windows Vista era. I mean, in each case, these guys have, I don't want to say recreated the RTS genre, but definitely inflected the RTS genre in a way that definitely kind of shocked, right? Kind of sent design ripples out through the industry, particularly Company of Heroes, and some of its implications. Now, Company of Heroes 3, not so well received. They were also, these guys actually also did Age of Empires 4, right? Kind of were brought in to swap in for Creative Assembly. So, incredibly well vaunted studio. Their start game, animation where it was like the big kind of underwater mine, spiked mine, crawling across the screen stands out in my mind. So it's, I won't yet call it unfortunate. I know they're going out into a cold, bleak world right now, much the same as I said about Toys for Bob. But, hopefully, they've been, I think they've been kind of a farm team for Sega since that acquisition. So I'm hoping this maybe gives them an opportunity to go out and find some things. Although, like I said, right now, I wouldn't put a ton of high expectations about commercial investment behind an RTS, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, not most. Well, I mean, we still see them come out every few years and stuff, but I don't think they're not as popular as they used to be back in the day. Unfortunately, we do see some resurgence. Obviously, we've had the not Capcom, EA throwing out the Command and Conquer series as of late. Age of Mythology coming back, the reboot or remake, whatever you want to call it. So we got some stuff coming down the line. Homeworld 3. So.
And Ine mentioned in the chat, that he's looking forward to Homeworld 3. Now, I just want to mention, Homeworld 3 is not, unfortunately, is not being done by Relic. It's being done by a developer called Blackbird Interactive, and it's actually being published by Gearbox.
That is a perfect transition into our next news story.
That's right. Our good friends at Embracer Group have sold off Gearbox Entertainment. Well, I guess parts of it. So I'll get on in the story here from Game Informer. Take-Two has bought, or will be buying, most likely, Gearbox for $460 million, which is quite the bargain since Embracer acquired it for $1.3 billion back in 2021. So they're looking for the closure of this transaction to be expected to be around the fiscal year Q1 of 2024. 2025. So what they actually had sold off here is I gotta jump over here for a second. Gearbox Software, Gearbox Montreal, Gearbox Studio Quebec. Obviously those franchises that they own are Borderlands, including Tiny Tina's Wonderland, Homeworld, which we just mentioned, Risk of Rain, Brothers in Arms, and Duke Nukem, which I always forget. Excuse me, that Gearbox has. But they do retain, they are going to retain some of the parts of Gearbox. Let me look here. So that'll include Gearbox Publishing, San Francisco, which will be renamed, which has publishing rights to Remnant franchise, which seems to be hitting big the last couple of years. They've had, I think, 2 just came out this year, last year, the end of last year, I think.
I'm sorry, Tal, just to make sure I understand. So these are parts of Gearbox that Embracer is keeping?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Remnant franchise, Hyper Light Breaker, and other upcoming unannounced titles. They're also keeping Cryptic Studios, which is doing the Neverwinter Online, Star Trek Online, Lost Boys Interactive, which I wasn't sure what they had done, but it looks like they have contributed to something called The Quiet Man, which I don't know what that is, and some development on Tiny Tina's Wonderlands.
Was The Quiet Man that super weird video game that was like FMV?
Yes, this is a Square one. Yes,
where the protagonist was deaf.
And it got kind of raked over the coals. Yeah.
Yeah. So keep for that one. And Captured Dimensions, which is actually a 3D scanning company. I had to look that one up too because I was like, I don't recognize that name either. So it's not, they don't make video games per se, but they help with video game creations. So those are the companies that they'll be keeping. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And I want to go back to the Quiet. So it was I mean, I don't want to just come out sounding like it was a knock by us on like accessibility and people who are have physical impediments, right? It was actually a great premise and a great setup. If I remember correctly, most of the raking over the coals came about like there was never really a great game behind the idea. Like it was very much a movie and not a ton of like strong interactivity behind it from a game mechanic perspective.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. Yes, the rough game was because it was a rough game, not because it was a premise that was not a good topic to tackle. Yeah, I remember watching some playthroughs. I mean, there was some jank in it. The narrative aspects of it, the kind of quote unquote interactivity of it was all very questionable.
Right, because at the end of the day, one of the things I still to this day would love to see is a Daredevil game that actually like traded on like the Matt Murdock, his inability to see, and then that kind of representation of how he compensated for that with abilities, but then also would like make you, when his weaknesses were exploited, right, would make you deal with his blindness. I think would be super interesting. So I think premises like that are good, and in this world where I know it's becoming unpopular, to deal with DEI, which I just think is a completely idiotic notion. But the premise, in this world where the industry is seeking inclusiveness, right, and in conjunction with trying to address accessibility. Making games accessible to someone who has a hearing impediment, while also having games that have somebody who has a hearing impediment as a protagonist, I think is a really great premise, and also would be great for the rest of us to be able to play to kind of try and gain an understanding for what people like that are dealing with and going through. I think would be awesome.
Yeah, we got a couple comments from one. As long as he made his X-ray vision not too hard on my eyes, somehow whole game looking around like that may not be the best for me. So yeah, I mean I'm sure they can figure something out. I almost kind of see it like a super hot type of graphics maybe when they're doing that kind of kind of radar-ish type of animation maybe. Go back to the article real quick. In the press release also they had mentioned that Gearbox confirms it has 6 titles in the works. 5 are sequels, and 2 of those sequels are from Borderlands and Homeworld franchises, and then an unannounced new IP, which they haven't said what that will be, but it's in development. So,
and I'm not sure if I caught it, but I think the main thing I was listening out for, although I got distracted at a couple of points, discussion topics in that rundown, was where is the Gearbox film line of business going? So because Randy Pitchford had peeled away from their game development efforts to focus on what they were doing with film studios. Their Borderlands movie is about to come out. I would believe that they have shopped other properties as well. I would expect that they were doing something with Tiny Tina. That's one thing that I'm like super curious about. Like, is that being retained by Embracer, or is that going along with Gearbox?
I think that it's not explicit in the stories that I read, But what is stated in most of the stories that I read is that Take-Two is the one that reaps the most benefits from Borderlands because it holds the publishing rights. And so that is, whether it is Gearbox, whether it is Take-Two, but I don't know that Embracer ever owned Borderlands as an IP because of the way that Take-Two was sharing that license.
Okay, so we would think that they would be going along with them, and that Take-Two would have argued for that to be assured in that exchange.
Yep.
Right,
which segues us nicely into the next story here, which is around Embracer, and Embracer might be done selling off game studios or also acquiring them. So the Embracer CEO, Lars Vingsford, is talking about all the restructuring, basically announcing that they are now in the end process of the restructuring program. They ended it at the end of March, that they are not necessarily looking to new mergers and acquisitions, that the big divestments with Saber and Gearbox were significant within their financial portfolio. So this is Embracer's kind of long sell-off of a number of different companies and layoff and closures of studios, right? We just talked about Gearbox. We talked about Saber Interactive a few weeks ago. Last fall, we've talked plenty about Embracer and their closing of things like Crystal Dynamics, or the cuts at Crystal Dynamics, not necessarily the closure at Saints Row publisher Volition Games, a number of other places. Yes, this was kind of the announcement almost 2 years ago, right? The restructuring program was announced in June of 23 after the investment capital deal fell through, and that in total they've laid off over about 1,400 staff members across their different studios. But I think one of the things that still surprised me in this is that even after all of this, Embracer still owns 111 game development studios, right? Like, they really went on an acquisition tear in terms of what they were purchasing up. And not only does this include those 111 game development studios, but they still own the rights to the Lord of the Ring franchise in terms of some of the publishing pieces of it. Dark Horse Comics, the tabletop game Asmodee, or the publisher Asmodee. So really still a variety of diverse endeavors, just not necessarily as as neck deep as they were in it before.
Yeah, it'll kind of be interesting to see how this turns out. I mean, one thing I want to do is I want to go back and foot stomp, I think, something that we covered here a few shows ago, and it was a repeat of some things I had covered in an episode of Talking About Games. Lars Wingefors, who is still in charge of Embracer Group, like, just to reiterate, like, Embracer Group is not new. It has its roots going back to the 90s, back in the old Nordic games. And so Lars has been at this for 31 years. I mean, at this point, he is probably literally one of the most experienced CEOs in the field, and is up there next to, I mean, not that it puts him in good company, but Kotick, who was around for a very long time. Kotick, at the time he left, was one of the top, may have been number 3. I think he was definitely in the top 5 in terms of CEOs of longevity in U.S. industry, because most CEOs do not last for decades at the helm. He's up there with Strauss. I'm not sure how long Strauss has been in the seat. But again, he's one of the longest serving CEOs, and again, like Embracer has been incorporated under multiple hats and multiple labels along the time. But he has 31 years of experience, right, in terms of that if you hop, skip, and jump across the continuity, of all those business units. It's going to be interesting. I have long held that one of the things with Embracer is that they were really more of a publisher's clearinghouse, right, of game studios, and that they weren't, those studios were never really tightly integrated in any type of corporate structure from an Embracer perspective. So it's super interesting that he's held on to 111 of them, because I know some of those studios are like literally studios of like one person, right? So I'm not really quite sure what the point is. Like there can't be any value. There can't be any, like, if you were going to liquidate all 111 of those companies, like if you declare bankruptcy, many of those studios don't provide any like dollar value on a balance sheet. So I don't really understand what the point is, unless the point is to harness all of that manpower and focus it towards, like they talked about, right, doubling down on the loader IP. And so if you were going to take a part of a game and farm it out to multiple of these studios, one person, and say, hey, go work on this model, go work on this piece of art, or, join in with this. And that could, if you kind of wove them together kind of in an Ubisoft fashion of, that would make sense. But
yeah, that's what I was just thinking, like potentially being able to leverage these very much in like the Ubisoft type of studio model, where you can have a lot of work going on for single titles across areas. I also wonder though too, with small studios like that, if they are simply just a publisher and taking a cut of something and providing an avenue to publish something in a smaller studio, the overhead, the costs are, there's not that much kind of ongoing overhead costs that needs to be sunk into keeping a studio up and going when it is 1 to 4 people working remotely and working in a independent studio, versus owning an office space, having multiple staff, having the reality of fringe benefits and all the other kind of overhead costs that come along with the ongoing nature of a workforce.
yeah, so I guess the play is to like hope for a Dave the Diver, to come out of one of these studios or something. Like I said, I think my main point of curiosity is seeing if this model works. We have them. I want to say there's one other publisher or group that we hear about kind of in the same model. We hear and see indications that there's a little bit of this kind of going on at Xbox, right? Where you have studios that are really just like literally staffed by like a top 10 of kind of frontline managers or technical leads, and then where all the rest of the work is being contracted out. Like you look at what's going on at the Initiative, where now they have yet another studio joining on to help them make Perfect Dark, and I'm kind of like, people are asking, well, what is the Initiative themselves doing? And I think not much, because I don't think that there's that many people left there anymore. So, that all being said, I can also see that model working. I can see Xbox saying, hey, why would we maintain all that overhead, right, and cost if I can just put, 10 software designers and architects and a creative director and a producer there, and I can contract a lot of the work out. I think that model's fine if you're able to make it successful. And then you just, have those people like move around to captain like another project. But I think that's, and then that also gives you the freedom, right, to really work on all those additional IPs, right, that they've purchased. So, it'll be, like I said, it'll be interesting to see if, in the current atmosphere of the industry, that also might be prudent, right, in some cases, in order to keep costs low, but also, get productivity out of a production pipeline. But, well, this remains to be seen.
All right, DB, do you want to keep us going on the...
Yeah, we'll hit some more layoff news here. We'll just hit them quick because there's always some conversation around this. But we've got Ubisoft with an announcement of 45 staff affected across its global and Asia Pacific teams. And then a Certain Affinity. Certain Affinity was a multiplayer map and multiplayer studio started by Max Hoberman. Yep, there we go. From Halo and Bungie back in the original Halo trilogy fame. It has done a number of maps and support related to Halo Infinite, Call of Duty, Hogwarts Legacy, even did some Hogwarts Legacy, but they were involved in a number of different projects, but they've laid off 10% of their workforce as well. Granted, 10% is 25 people, but still it's 10%. And so those are the most recent kind of rounds of layoffs in this past week. Any thoughts here, gentlemen? Or I want to move into what I find is one of the more interesting news stories. I thought that the Embracer saying, I guess we're done closing studios and selling off studios was going to be my news story of the week, but this was a really interesting study. So this is a study out of Newzoo, which I have pulled data from in the past in terms of game industry data. This is their 2023 PC and console gaming report. I think we had similar numbers coming out of them related a few weeks ago when we were talking about mobile game revenue, where we had mobile game revenue being 120 some $1 billion last year in 2023. We had the good discussion with chat in terms of how so much of that is kind of consolidated toward the top in terms of mobile revenue. And one of the things that's interesting with this report in terms of console and PC gaming is a lot of this is on the playtime and how much time engagement was spent. And that is very much the same in terms of a lot of playtime being spent by a small number of titles. So just some quick hits here as I look through the report. $93.5 billion in terms of console and PC revenue for 2023. So definitely a little smaller than the mobile market. And then we go into the breakdown of premium sales versus microtransactions. That premium sales are still in the 57% range, where microtransactions are about a third of that cost. If we look at the monthly active user numbers over for PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch, and no surprise here, or at least shouldn't be too much of a surprise. If we look at Fortnite ruling the roost in all four platforms, that Roblox hits up number 2 with PC, Grand Theft Auto is number 2 with PlayStation, and Call of Duty is number 2 with Xbox. And with PlayStation, Xbox, the number 3 just swaps between Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto. And Minecraft is up there for number 3 with PC. And what that leads to is, and this is what I found really interesting about this report, is what it leads to is that so much, like about 60%, 63% of playtime in 2023 was occupied by titles that were over 6 years old. Things like Fortnite, Roblox, League of Legends, Minecraft, Grand Theft Auto. That and then as you look at the amount of playtime for new games that are only 2 years older or younger, 2023 was only 23%, which sounds low, but in 2022, that number was even less at 19%. So one of the sliding differences here is that the games, the 6-year plus games last year was at 57%, And so right, Wana, right? Like this is why companies think that they can make a 6 to 10 year live service game, is that they look at numbers like this and see, oh, well, we just need to become the next Roblox, League of Legends, Fortnite, which is really hard to do. And this is one of the things that the report points out, is that even in the 23% of the new games that were played, 60% of those new games were annualized franchises. Things like Call of Duty, FIFA, NBA 2K, Madden, and the show. Wana, your question in terms of Counter-Strike and where it hits. Counter-Strike is counted as an older, past 6-year game. Counter-Strike was number 4 on the PC. So there's your answer to where Counter-Strike falls in terms of its titles and the age piece. New titles, brand new titles, counted for only 8%. That the new IP, new titles, even new IP is not necessarily the same, because new titles included things like Diablo 4, which is not an annualized franchise, only counted for about 8% of the total playtime. So I found this, I'm still kind of going through this report. Number of things in terms of different franchises, and we get some numbers around leveraging around back catalogs with Capcom and Konami. Number of different engagement metrics that are here. So I've as a numbers guy, I appreciate the ability to kind of peel back this layer, but I think one of the things that I found really interesting about it was that idea of, for as hard as people chase things, right? We are in the week of the season of the Joker for the Suicide Squad, and all of the blowback that's happening there in terms of Rocksteady's struggles with trying to make a new live service game. Like, for all the work and effort and investment that companies have put in to try to be the next long tail game, it is really hard to pull people off their existing long tail game. And we see that with kind of trailing off of user bases. But also these numbers and the metrics really show how much of the market is dominated by existing IP.
Well, then that also dovetails with data that we have that shows that on Steam, the vast bulk of the revenue is earned by a very small number of games. And so even if you look at the new and you look at the small numbers that the new games like suck up, then amongst that small percentage, that is all being earned by a very small number of games, which means all of the new games. And we're at the point now where I remember on this show, like years ago, we cited the number that there were 10,000 games a year that came out on Steam. And I can't remember what year that was that we cited that number, but that number is now up to 14,000.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was multiple. I mean, that was pre-COVID when we were talking about that number.
Right. So, we have a lot of these notions that, the industry, it's, AAA is the problem, and, we need all these small indies. And I'm like, you guys need to understand, like, the small indies are making peanuts, like, in comparison to, the stuff that's sucking up a lot of space. One thing are you good, DBQ? I wanted to loop back and hit 101. So one question from Warawana when we were talking about the previous story, and really this kind of peanut butters across multiple stories that we've talked about, is this notion of AI. It seems with the AI push that it will only justify Microsoft using contractors more. And like I said, we have multiple of these stories. Like, I can't believe that part of Embracer's like projected formula is not about heavily leveraging AI. We have, EA talking about leveraging AI. We know that, any of these companies that are challenged by, $200, $300 million budgets, but are concurrently laying people off, but haven't come off the gas pedal, and any notion of their production pipeline, that they're going to be heavily leveraging AI. I work on an AI program now, and I will say from from years kind of circling around the topic and now being directly invested in it. I mean, you've got to sell me something else that would convince me that like we're anywhere near a point where we're going to hit some huge inflection point and tip over point where like suddenly people are going to be off to the races and we're going to be able to create big AAA games with like staffs that of like 50 people because we can do it all with AI. I think a lot of that notion of predicting those horizons of like 5 years or less are overly optimistic. But one of the things I want to really point people to, if you want to like read something very heady about this topic, is you should read this article by Cory Doctorow. Now, Cory Doctorow is an incredibly brilliant person in technology. I rank him up there with, I can't remember Ben's name, but the guy who does Stratechery. And he wrote this article today or yesterday, about humans are not perfectly vigilant. And it starts off talking about how people have built AI models that are a little bit malicious and kind of lead to the propagation of hallucinations by a lot of these AI models, and how developers who are working on AI models download those libraries and then propagate those hallucinations. And if you're not familiar with AI hallucinations, which are instances where AI is relatively convinced that it's giving you a good answer, but it's actually incorrect. And it just the three things I want to highlight, right, where not people, but businesses are kind of getting it potentially wrong and kind of where they're headed, is what they are being convinced about, what they're getting all lathered up about. The whole AI bubble he refers to is these primary stakes, right? These primary tenets. What they believe is that there are low stakes, high value tasks that will recoup the massive cost of AI training and operation. 2, that there are high stakes, high value tasks that can be made cheaper by adding an AI to a human operator. And 3, that by adding more training data to an AI will make it stop hallucinating so that it can take over high stakes, high value tasks with a human in the loop. I would invite you to read. It's very long. Anything Cory Doctorow writes is going to be incredibly thorough. He is the person who is the author behind, in conjunction with a partner of his, behind these notions of choke point capitalism and enshittification, which we've brought up on BRAP in this podcast as well. But talking about how kind of big companies, kind of big tech companies, the top 6 now, really top 5, kind of shoulder bars themselves in between consumers and suppliers, make the suppliers out to be the bad guys, and then slowly but surely divert all the value that the suppliers were earning to themselves, while making prices cheaper for consumers, but then concurrently, turn those consumers against the suppliers, thinking that the suppliers are the bad guys, and then which causes them to move everything down the value chain of quality, right, in order to get to a cheaper price. So it's some interesting things to read.
All right, DB, any other comments on that one?
No, I mean, I think we have lots to unpack, plenty to talk about, and lots of ripples coming out of it. I appreciate the AI conversation there, GameLogIQ, and anytime you can bring in an author like Cory Doctorow and his multi faceted aspects, right, in terms of kind of speculative fiction, but also kind of tech prognosticating is beneficial.
Yes. All right, let's jump into our round robin section here, and I will head up first. Just 3 quick ones for me in this section. I jumped back into Hogwarts Legacy on the Steam Deck, so just kind of continuing my single player story games on the Steam Deck as I wanted to do originally. So jumping back into that, I just only done it for the last few days, and I was kind of stuck on this one mission. So I finally finished that, and I was actually kind of lost on how to get out of the cave that I was stuck in on this stupid mission. Finally get out of there, and then I just saved and I shut down because I was like, all right, I'm out of there. I'll just save it there. It's good to go. But yeah, I was just having a lot of fun. I think we had mentioned Hogwarts Legacy actually quite a few times in this episode, and it's still great fun. And I think I still have some magic techniques to unlock in that game too. So I gotta look back. I think I was at maybe like 30% through this. I guess I'm assuming that's the story when they're talking about 30% of the game. I hope it's not everything, because I'm definitely not a completionist when it comes to that kind of stuff. Like I don't like to find every little hidden thing. So I just like to go through the story and kind of be done with it, and move on to the next one. But enjoying that right now. GameLogIQ, looks like you are headlong into Modern Warfare 3 and maybe spiraled into some other things because of that. Looks like.
Yeah, I'll try and cover this quickly in 60 seconds or less since we're running short on time. Basically, the general gist of it is as Call of Duty was mounting up for Season 3, and about the week before, I saw them seeding a lot of incremental updates kind of in the background. And what that would cause is you would be playing the game, everything would be fine, and then all of a sudden the game would crash. And then I would try and boot the game again, and the game would crash. A couple times it took my whole system down with it. Didn't just crash the app. And then I would go into the game and I would see, oh, that's new, right? I would see like a new UI element or a new menu presented. I'm like, okay, well, that clearly tells me that they just pushed an update in the background. Then there were points where the game was unplayable unless and then when I found the fix to it was updating to the latest driver. So like literally within like a span of days, I would see NVIDIA release a driver update. And if I didn't immediately look, and I'm cognizant of the need to keep up drivers, but typically it's not day to day, right? Like you shouldn't be running a driver pack one day, a game releases an update, and then the game is unplayable within the span of one day. But those were the types of things I was seeing in the walk up to the beginning of Season 3. And so just what it became over time is like the game just became unplayable. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like and what broke me was the night before I was leaving for spring break, I was like, I got off prep. I was like, okay, I want to play like an hour of Call of Duty. And like I instead of playing the game, I spent 40 hours like troubleshooting and rebooting my system. So I think it kind of soured me on the notion of in one night one night culminating from a week of mess. It kind of soured me on the idea of games as a service right now because, Halo Infinite was my backup, but Halo Infinite has like the player base has just kind of become problematic. And I'm like, without a good backup, like what am I doing? And I was like, I think it intermixed with a lot of stuff that I'm thinking about right now. But I think I just basically walked away from like battle passes, games as a service. I've also been recently diving deeper into my old shtick of when I was covering, mobile technology and tech from 2011 to 2019. One of the things I recently came into possession of as a result was the OnePlus 12 to go along with my reviews of smartphones, that I've been kind of doing in the background. And I took this with me on break and, played some mobile games, didn't play anything super significant, didn't get into, some of the more advanced stuff. I'm kind of in a slow onboarding. I started this a couple weeks ago with iOS, and I think I'm a little bit ahead of the curve there, and kind of chewing into some meatier stuff on Android. I'm a little bit behind. And so, I did take an Xbox controller. I did get into Asphalt 8 and Drive, and air traffic controller, some touch-based stuff like air traffic controller and OK Golf and some other things, but then some controller-based stuff, like I said, like Asphalt 8 and Drive. I will ramp that up, over the next few weeks, but that's kind of where I spent a lot of my time, just backing off a little bit from, games as a service, and then, focusing over spring break on some of the mobile stuff, which I plan on incorporating more and more of, getting back to kind of like what we used to do in previous years of the podcast. But that has also spilled over right into kind of my approach to, even PC and console gaming, which, we'll talk about a little bit in the What's Up Next.
Now, who would have thought your problems with Modern Warfare 3 would have spiraled you into mobile games? So, DV, speaking of racing games that I guess GameLogIQ was talking about, you have kind of newish racing game you're playing.
Yeah, new to me, right? Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 came out on Game Pass this past week. It was released back in the fall of 23. I was a big proponent and really enjoyed the first Hot Wheels Unleashed. This is it's done by Milestone game developer. And so it has some solid technical racing chops to it. And it is such solid racing game that is often at odds with itself, I think, is the way that, as I've played it and I enjoy it, and I enjoyed the first one, but there is enough physics and aspects to it in terms of control that it is simply not just a kart racer with a lot of drifting and kind of fluidity, that there's a lot more touch and physics going into it. But at the same time, it's a bunch of Hot Wheels cars, and the graphics are certainly a step up from the first game. It does a few things, like it adds a jump button so you can jump through ramps and hoops, and allow to do a couple other tricks and things. Like it's additive, but it is also the barrier to entry in terms of really enjoying it, unless you're playing kind of local multiplayer. It is not the easiest, right? Like you could turn it down, right? Like, yes, thanks, Wara. Yeah, I think the first game was really fun. This game, if you pick it up on sale and people enjoyed the first game, it's just more of it, and new tracks, right? Like, it is a nice aspect of the game. I think you turn down the difficulty if you're a younger person looking for a kart racer, and if you are somebody who has Hot Wheels nostalgia but wants a more nuanced racer, then you can actually turn it up quite a bit and make it pretty difficult. So again, I'm glad it's on Game Pass. It's a whole lot of fun. I thought I was going to end up playing a little more Diablo 4 now that it's back on Game Pass, but my grinding time has really been in Hot Wheels and in MLB The Show.
Nice. So other than like the jump button, any other significant changes from the first one? I never played the first one, but I definitely want to play this or try out.
They added kind of monster trucks to it and motorcycles. So it again plays with some physics, allows you to do some new things. It is definitely a beautifully physics-based game. Even in the tutorial, if you're not at a high enough speed to do a classic orange track loop-de-loop on a Hot Wheels track, you will just float down into the lawn and fall off into the play box, right? Like, so there's aspects there. So yes, I think it's a couple different types of vehicles rather than just having one based vehicle, and then the jump button is there. The other piece is that I haven't played with it enough yet, but I think all of the drifting is just a meter. And if you played the first one, you had kind of a meter drift where your kind of classic burnout, kind of boost that you could use, not meter drift, but meter boost, that you'd build up the meter through drifting and then hit the turbo button and it would slowly go down. But you also had vehicles that had kind of 3 nodes that you could boost 3 different times rather than a meter. And so there were a couple different vehicles that had different types of boost. This time I think it's all one boost.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I definitely want to give that a try. Last couple of games for me. First, I'll actually go to Rainbow Six Siege. I actually jumped back into. I was going to play with my son, but then we realized it's not cross-platform because he bought it on PC and I only had it on Xbox. I bought it a while ago on the Xbox actually, but I end up just kind of playing with randoms and kind of getting back into that a little bit. So it was kind of fun. I just had a good time with it. Something a little bit different than a little more tactical than just run and gun, Call of Duty, or any of the other battle royale games I play. And then the final game, which kind of dovetails into what we're playing coming up this next week, is No Man's Sky. I got back into that. They did release their latest update, kind of big update last week, Orbital, which changes the space stations. So now they're procedurally generated also. Before they're just static, and there's a couple different, or I shouldn't say couple, there's a few variations between the different space stations. I think depending on where you went. But now, not only will the outside look different, but the inside was always the same, like wherever you went. But now the insides will also look different for each race of beings in the game. So unfortunately, Xbox is where I bought the game originally back in the day when it finally came to Xbox, and the Xbox update just came out today, I believe, actually. So I was just kind of getting back into it, just to kind of get back into controls, and there's like probably at least a year's worth of updates that I hadn't really played through before. So I'm kind of wet my whistle with that stuff before I jump into the space stations. There's actually ship customization too now that you can do. So you kind of have to hunt for parts, and then you can bring it back to one of the space stations. I believe it's the space station, or maybe the Atlas. I can't remember, but and then you can customize your ship. So that's going to be kind of cool too. So, and I know that was a big ask from the community as of late. So, or the last few years was ship customization. So that should be pretty cool. So I'm jumping back into that. So that's I've always liked that. It's kind of like it's like Minecraft, and it's kind of those games like that where I can just kind of come and go. There's always going to be updates, so there's always something new for me to try out. So, and it's just space-based stuff I always like too. So I'll get into it again. So that is it for me, and like I said, that'll be my upcoming week's game, since the update just came out, so I can actually dive into that. Any other games you guys been playing, or anything you want to talk about for the coming week?
The only thing I want to mention is what is the No Man's Sky guy's name again? Sean?
Yeah, I forgot his last
something or other.
Yeah,
but he was mentioning on Twitter that the other thing that's been going on that's a positive note for No Man's Sky is their reviews on Steam are now at 91%, very positive for recent reviews, which has picked up their lifetime reviews to 78%. I think they were actually up as high as 80 when he mentioned this, but yeah, Sean Murray, thank you very much, Shwara. But they are at mostly positive. No, they weren't at 80% yet. They were at mostly positive, 78% for lifetime. And so he mentioned that, with all of the work that has been done on No Man's Sky, that it is theoretical that No Man's Sky will eventually hit 80% on Steam, which I think is very significant from where it started. And it's kind of where I've mentioned in our discussion of Xbox publishing that they have a couple games that have problems on Steam with Forza Motorsport and Starfield and even Dragon's Dogma. Not Xbox. That's not Xbox, but that's Capcom. But again, it's always possible that these games right over their lifetime, when these companies stick with them, and this Orbital update looks amazing. May find favorable ground with the Steam community. There was something else I was going to mention about No Man's Sky, but we can go on.
Okay.
Oh, actually, sorry.
Oh.
It was actually a soundbite for you, Tao. I was going to suggest that you check out Spaceborne 2 if you're into this type of game.
Spaceborne 2. Okay, I think I might have seen that come through my recommendations actually on Steam before. I might even have wishlisted it, but I'll check it out if I haven't and take a look at it. So that, like I said, that'll be my upcoming week's GameLogIQ going for War Fleet Commander or Command and Conquer.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, so this inflection point that the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 caused me to kind of root back towards some other ways that I've approached games. And so what's on my list right now is to hit up a couple RTSs in AI War Fleet Command and also potentially Command and Conquer. I had some of the games from the big pack that just came out like last month or whatever, and then I spent $16. Because one of the things that Steam is great about is when they have collections, they don't force you to pay full price for the entire collection if you already own some of it. They give you a discount for the stuff you already own, and so I only needed to pay an additional $15.90 to get the rest of everything in the Command and Conquer pack because I already had like 2 or 4 of the titles. So I did buy the rest of it, but I'm also thinking about planning on getting into Command and Conquer Red Alert, either the first one, the second one, or the third one. Now, all of this is to say I also have a nit, because one of the spaces that Call of Duty fulfilled with me was particular nights when we have the podcast, I would be able to get off, jump on Call of Duty and have a guaranteed like return on entertainment value, return on entertainment investment, for an hour or so after the podcast and not be up super late. After the podcast is not the time for me to go try and play AI Warfleet Command, right? Which is incredibly detailed and deep. Man, yeah, it's ridiculous. So I may need to figure out something more first-person shootery or a driving game that I ratchet into slots of convenience instead of Call of Duty. While I probably take a season off from that game at least.
DB, anything on your radar for the coming week, new or old?
I'm gonna be traveling this next week here a little bit, so I'll probably be playing some things on my Switch. And in the meantime, I still got to keep getting my pitcher to the majors. So
nice. All right. Yeah. I was going to say something more about No Man's Sky, but I'll save it maybe for next time as we're running a little late here. All right, gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. Any last words before we head out here?
The only thing I'll mention is I did receive affirmation that we did recover the cat.
Nice. The cat has been saved. All right. Thank you, Wana and Nate, for stopping by. I didn't see anybody else stop by, but if anybody did, thank you for joining us tonight. Always a pleasure to have you gentlemen and ladies stop by for the conversation. DBQ, GameLogIQ, thank you for joining me tonight. Next week, episode 333, should be back on Sunday, and our primary host will be Mr. GameLogIQ. So join us most likely next Sunday. Thank you, everyone. Please take care of yourselves out there. Play those games, and we will see you next week.
She pull up, hop out, then she swerve. Do your two-step, your little catwalk, make it work. Make it work, Jill dance, make it work, strike a pose. Make it work, Jill dance, make it work, strike a pose.
I pull up, hop out, then I swerve. Do my two-step, my little catwalk, make it work. Make it work, Jill dance, make it work, strike a pose. Make it work, Jill dance, make it work, strike a pose.
Do your dance, girl, dance, do your dance, girl, dance. Is it me and you, or is you with your friends, girl? Is it you and them, or is we making plans, girl? Double up the coops, eyes and hers the bands, girl. She a 10, better tell her strike a pose. She don't switch positions and she plays the role. Hit up the salon, she gets her nails and toes. Hair done, neck, wrist, hands froze. She pull up, hop out, then she swerve. Do your two-step, your little catwalk, make it work.